Hello there, my sleep fellows. Tonight, we journey once more into the world where magic lingers, not just in spells and potions, but in the very air you breathe, the books you hold, and the corridors that remember your footsteps. This is a story from a quieter corner of Hogwarts, one not often explored even by the most curious students, a place of whispers, warmth, and wonder. Let your mind relax, your breathing slow, and your heart gently drift as we step into the story of the Library of Echoes, a hidden sanctuary within the castle where the books do more than hold knowledge. They softly speak your secrets back to you, but don't worry, they don't shout, they whisper. Our tale begins on a cloudy afternoon, the kind where the sky outside hangs in still grey sheets and the castle glows a little warmer in contrast. The great hall has just emptied from lunch, the scent of treacle tart still faint in the corridors, and the halls carry a comfortable hush. Outside, the soft tapping of rain gently brushes against the tall windows of Hogwarts, making it the perfect sort of day to wander into a forgotten corner of the castle. Let us take you now to the library, not the main section where Madame Pince frowns over every creased page, but to a back room, nestled quietly beyond a narrow spiral staircase. A room that doesn't always appear on maps, a room that opens only to those who need to find it, even if they don't know they're looking. The walls here are taller than the main library, curving into an arched ceiling painted with stars that glow faintly even in daylight. Old wooden shelves stretch so high that ladders lean like sleepy sentinels along their sides. Candles float in mid-air, flickering gently, illuminating the golden brown spines of books that haven't been touched in decades, or perhaps ever. There's a stillness here that doesn't feel empty, it feels alive, as if the room itself is listening. Somewhere near the far wall, nestled between a heavy table and a stained glass window, depicting a young witch with a finger to her lips, a lone armchair waits. Its fabric is worn soft, its wooden arms carved with small leaves and moons. This chair has heard many secrets, but tonight it will witness one more. And before we begin our journey through enchanted pages and quiet revelations, if you find yourself cozy, safe, and gently intrigued by this magical path we walk, perhaps you might like to join us again sometime. You're always welcome here, in this peaceful place of tales and dreams. Now close your eyes if you like, and let the candles lead the way. We're just getting started. Her name was Luna Lovegood. Though she'd long since graduated from Hogwarts, Luna never truly left the castle behind. In many ways, Hogwarts had imprinted itself on her spirit. Even now, years after the great battles and adventures that had once filled the stone halls with urgency and wonder, Luna returned often, not for fame nor duty, but for something gentler, for the secrets still whispering in its forgotten rooms. Tonight's tale follows her, not as the wide-eyed student with radish earrings, but as a quiet, thoughtful young woman who walked the empty corridors with a soft smile and eyes full of memory. She was invited back by Headmistress McGonagall herself to assist with the reorganization of the older sections of the library. Though, truthfully, Luna suspected the castle had called her back for reasons deeper than books and dust. She wandered now with ease, humming lightly under her breath as she carried a woven satchel filled with parchment, ink, and a single teacup wrapped in cloth. Her robes were slightly wrinkled, her wand tucked behind her ear like a quill, and she often stopped mid-step to peer at a portrait, a crack in the floor, or the soft fluttering of pages somewhere beyond her sight. This afternoon, she wasn't alone. By her side walked Neville Longbottom, now Professor Longbottom, the cheerful and kind-hearted herbology master who had grown into his courage like a tree growing into its roots. He had agreed to help Luna search for rare magical texts, rumored to be tucked away in an offshoot of the restricted section. Texts, believed to contain early botanical enchantments and protective growth charms used by the founders themselves. "You really think it's still down here?" Neville asked softly, his voice echoing against the quiet stone walls. Luna tilted her head, a strand of silvery hair falling over her cheek. "I think if we listen kindly enough, the room will tell us," Neville chuckled, not in disbelief but in admiration. He had learned by now that Luna's instincts were rarely wrong, especially when it came to things that others couldn't see or hear. As they walked further into the library's hidden depths, their footsteps softened, absorbed by centuries-old rugs and the thick hush of unread stories. Occasionally, they would pass a flickering lantern or a painting so faded it barely whispered anymore. Still, Luna greeted each one with a small nod and a kind word. "I always feel like the books are watching," Neville said, glancing upward. "They are," Luna replied gently, "but not in the way people think. They don't judge. They remember." And in that stillness something stirred, not threatening but aware. Somewhere beyond the tall shelves and dust-covered tables, a new door was waiting to be opened. One neither of them knew existed, not yet, but Hogwarts had already begun to whisper. The soft creak of ancient wood filled the quiet space as Luna leaned gently against a bookshelf, letting her fingers drift across the spines of the forgotten volumes. Each one had a curious feel, not cold like other books, but warm, as though they remembered being held long ago. Neville, just a few steps behind her, peered at a ladder leaning at an odd angle, its top disappearing into the dim ceiling above. "These shelves go much higher than the rest of the library," he whispered, not wanting to disturb the delicate hush that had settled over the room. "They grow taller when they need to hide something," Luna replied dreamily. "Sometimes it's not about keeping the knowledge out of reach, but keeping it safe." Neville smiled faintly, unsure whether she meant it literally or metaphorically. With Luna, it was often both. As they wandered deeper into the hushed chamber, Luna's eyes fell on a narrow archway at the far end of the room, one that hadn't been there moments before. There was no door, only a velvet curtain in midnight blue, embroidered with swirling silver runes that shimmered ever so slightly, as if stirred by a breeze that didn't exist. She turned to Neville. "That wasn't there when we came in, was it?" Neville blinked. "I don't think so." Luna stepped forward without hesitation. "Well, that must mean we're meant to find it." The curtain was surprisingly cool to the touch, and it rustled softly as Luna pulled it aside. What lay beyond was not another row of bookshelves, but a small circular room. The air felt older here, more awake. The chamber was dim, lit only by a single orb of floating light at the center. Around the perimeter stood 7 bookshelves forming a perfect circle. Each was filled with books of varying sizes, some leather-bound, some cloth, others with no title at all. And though there was no visible source of movement, 1 or 2 books seemed to gently shift in place, as if breathing in time with the stillness of the room. Neville stepped in behind her, his voice low. "Is this another part of the restricted section?" Luna shook her head slowly. "No, this is something else entirely." They stood silently, letting the calm atmosphere wrap around them like a blanket. Then, just as Luna reached for a book with a faded crimson cover, it happened. The moment her fingers touched the spine, a gentle hum filled the air. Not loud, not startling, but deep, resonant, and from within the book came a voice. Soft, whispery. Familiar, it said her name. Luna. She froze. The voice wasn't frightening. It wasn't even truly separate. It sounded almost as if it had come from inside her own mind. A memory? A thought? No. It was clearer than that. Did you hear that? She asked quietly. Neville nodded, his expression serious now. It said your name. Another hum began, this time from a different book on another shelf. Then another.
And another.
One by one, the shelves began to glow faintly, each book emitting soft, layered whispers like a quiet forest breeze. It wasn't chaotic, it was musical, calm. And though the words were hushed and mostly unintelligible, both Luna and Neville could make out certain fragments. The time you stayed behind to comfort a crying first year. The secret you whispered to the sky from the astronomy tower. Vik, the name you wrote 100 times in the corner of your notes. Neville turned slowly, realizing that the voices weren't just speaking to Luna, they were speaking to him too. The plant you brought back to life when no one believed you could. The fear you didn't share after the battle. The hope you buried when you said goodbye to her. Each line was a truth, a memory, a secret, something not written in any diary or shared aloud. And yet, here the books were, whispering them gently.
Not to mock, not to expose.
But as if acknowledging the quiet depths of their souls. The library of echoes, Luna whispered, breath-catching. It doesn't store knowledge, it stores who we are. They stood in stillness, surrounded by floating memories. Neville walked over to one of the softly glowing shelves and slowly pulled a book loose. Its cover was green and embossed with a faintly glowing vine pattern. As he opened it, no pages turned, but instead a warm light unfurled from its center, projecting an image in the air. A memory. It was him as a third year, young, nervous, standing in Greenhouse 3, accidentally knocking over a mandrake pot and trying frantically to put it right again before anyone saw. Professor Sprout had been watching the whole time and had simply smiled. Neville laughed softly under his breath.
I hadn't thought about this in years.
The memory faded gently, returning to light and then disappearing into the book's pages. Luna opened a book of her own. It showed a much younger her, sitting by herself in the Ravenclaw common room, tracing constellations in the air with a lit wand while everyone else slept. She had whispered stories to the stars, believing that they would carry them to her mother. The book didn't judge. It simply remembered. They're not just our memories, Luna said quietly. They're the echoes of what mattered most. Even if we didn't know it at the time. Neville looked around, taking in the entire circular chamber. How long do you think this has been here? A very long time, Luna said, fingers grazing the glowing script on another spine.
And I think
it only opens when someone's ready to listen. They stood side by side for a while, pulling books gently from shelves, listening, watching. Each one revealed something personal, gentle, intimate. The room wasn't just a repository of memory, it was a place of healing, of reflection. And as they explored, the whispering voices grew softer, as though the room sensed their peace. Finally, Luna turned to Neville and said, I think this room doesn't just keep secrets. It helps us forgive ourselves for them. Neville nodded, his expression warm.
And maybe
reminds us that we were never alone. A soft breeze passed through the room, though no window was open. The silver runes above the curtain entrance shimmered again, now less like warnings and more like blessings. They didn't take any books with them. They didn't need to. The Library of Echoes had already given them what they came for, without them ever knowing they were seeking it. Later that evening, with soft candlelight trailing behind them, Luna and Neville sat quietly on an old velvet bench just outside the chamber of the Library of Echoes. The quiet had grown even deeper now, not empty, but thoughtful, like the castle itself was mulling over their visit. The air carried a gentle scent of old parchment and enchanted wood polish, soothing in its own way. Neville shifted, his voice barely more than a whisper. Do you think, if you opened a book here too many times, it would start saying things you didn't want to remember? Luna smiled softly, her fingers still gently dusted with faint golden light from the memory books. Maybe, but even then, it would say them kindly, He nodded, as though that made sense, but before the comfort of silence could settle too deeply, something flickered, a low vibration passed under their feet, so soft it could have been imagined. Then came a sound like wind catching pages, but no books moved. Neville glanced at Luna, who was already looking down the corridor with curious calm. Another flicker, this time not beneath them, but above. They turned their eyes upward. Just outside the archway to the secret chamber, one of the tall library lanterns flickered unnaturally, glowing not with its usual amber hue, but with a silvery blue shimmer. The flame danced like water for a moment, and then stopped entirely. The corridor darkened. Luna stood up slowly, her head tilting to one side, in that thoughtful way she had when something curious was unfolding. "I think something else is waking up." Neville followed her gaze. That didn't happen before. The silver-blue shimmer pulsed once more, then shot silently through the air like a ribbon of moonlight, weaving itself along the shelves. It slipped through cracks between books, gliding like a ghost, until it stopped at the far end of the corridor. There, embedded in the stone wall, was something neither of them had noticed before. A mirror, not a large one, like the mirror of Erased, but a slender panel shaped like a vertical book spine. Its frame was etched in quiet runes, and the glass within it didn't reflect the corridor behind them. It reflected something else, or rather, someone else. Neville leaned in first. "Luna, this isn't us." They weren't looking at themselves. Inside the mirror, two other figures stood, wearing Hogwarts robes, yes, but older, worn, faded around the edges like figures in an old photo. Their faces were unfamiliar, but there was something hauntingly real in their eyes. "They're not alive anymore," Luna whispered softly, stepping closer. And then the mirror spoke, not aloud, not through lips but through thought, gentle, measured, ancient. "We were the first to hear the library speak." The words settled into their minds like mist, soft and slow. Neville blinked, instinctively reaching for his wand, but Luna placed a gentle hand on his arm.
It's okay.
"They're not here to hurt." The mirror pulsed again, and new words formed like ripples in their thoughts. "We were its keepers. Once, the library remembers us.
And now it chooses you." Neville stepped back slightly.
Chooses us?
For what?
For listening, for honoring the echoes, for preserving what should not be forgotten." The ghostly figures in the mirror slowly turned, revealing something behind them, a room that looked strikingly like the Library of Echoes, only darker, deeper, filled with floating pages and suspended lanterns that never burned out. There were books there too, but not on shelves. They floated in the air, orbiting slowly as if waiting for someone to speak their names. Luna's voice was calm but tinged with reverence.
"It's showing us."
Another layer. The mirror shimmered once more. Within the library lies the Chamber of Unspoken Echoes. The place where secrets never said aloud still live. Neville frowned slightly.
"How can something unspoken still echo?"
Luna turned to him with soft wonder in her eyes. "Because thoughts have weight.
Feelings unshared don't vanish.
They settle. They linger. And in a place like Hogwarts, they find a home." Without another word, the mirror began to dissolve. Not fade, but unravel into floating script, letters spinning into soft silver particles. The wall behind it cracked open with barely a sound, revealing a narrow passage, lit only by a series of faintly glowing runes across the floor. They pulsed like a heartbeat, inviting but patient. Neville swallowed. "We're not turning back, are we?" Luna simply smiled. The two stepped into the corridor, their footsteps quiet against ancient stone. The deeper they walked, the more the air seemed to shimmer. Not hot, not cold, but filled with an energy that felt almost like memory itself. Not any one memory, but the feeling of remembering.
Of longing.
of things nearly forgotten. At the end of the corridor, a door waited. It was simple, made of polished wood, with no handle. Instead, at its center sat a small bronze plaque with a single word engraved upon it. Think. Luna pressed her palm to it, and for a moment nothing happened. Then softly, gently, the door opened. The chamber of unspoken echoes was unlike anything they had seen. It was quiet.
Deeply, impossibly quiet, yet it felt
Full. Thousands of tiny silver wisps floated in the air, like mist that had learned how to pause. Each one seemed to contain a fragment of something, an idea, a wish, a truth never shared. They drifted past the two visitors like fireflies in slow motion. Neville reached out to one. As his fingers brushed it, the room whispered, not aloud, but within him.
I was afraid I wouldn't be enough. The voice wasn't his.
It wasn't Luna's, it was someone else's unspoken truth.
A student from long ago? A teacher? A ghost? Luna caught one of the wisps and held it gently.
I wish I had told them I loved them. Her eyes softened.
They're not secrets to be feared.
Their feelings left behind. Neville looked around, taking in the quiet magic of it all.
This is what the library protects.
Luna nodded slowly. And it trusts us to listen. They stood together for a long time, letting the gentle thoughts swirl around them, not to solve or change them, but simply to honor them. And far above them, somewhere in the castle walls, the books hummed quietly. A new chapter had begun. The silver mist lingered like breath, suspended in time, floating gently around Luna and Neville as they stood in the quiet heart of the chamber of unspoken echoes. Neither of them moved for a while. It wasn't that they were afraid, it was that this room demanded stillness, like standing beside a sleeping creature who only dreams when left undisturbed. Outside the chamber, Hogwarts hummed softly with its usual life, quills scratching in common rooms, distant bells marking the change of periods, the occasional whoosh of a passing ghost. But here, deep beneath the known library, time seemed to pause between beats. Luna tilted her head, watching one of the shimmering thoughts drift past her shoulder. I think they're drawn to certain people, she whispered, like thoughts waiting for the right mind to hear them. Neville slowly turned toward a low stone pedestal in the center of the chamber, barely lit by the glow of the mist. A single book rested there. Unlike the memory books upstairs, this one had no title, no spine, no visible ink. Its pages were a warm, pale parchment, unwritten but pulsing gently with light. He reached out, brushing his fingers across the cover. The moment he did, a quiet hum spread through the floor, and the pages rustled, not from air, but as if they were responding to his presence. Luna stepped beside him.
It's listening to you. Neville looked puzzled.
But I haven't said anything. Luna placed her hand beside his on the cover. Exactly. At once the book opened on its own. Lines of glowing ink began to etch themselves across the page, not written with a quill, but formed from light. Luna leaned forward to read. He didn't speak of it, not even once, but he carried the guilt like soil beneath his fingernails. He thought if he buried it deeply enough, no one would know the garden ever wilted. Neville stared. He hadn't heard those words before, and yet they felt like they had lived in his chest for years. It's about me, he murmured.
About what I never said after the battle.
About the friends I couldn't save. Luna's voice was calm and kind. The library remembers more than memories. It holds your echoes, the thoughts that never made it into words. Neville ran his hand across the next page. More script formed, this time slower, as if waiting for his mind to catch up with itself. Suddenly a ripple passed through the room. The silver mist paused mid-air, stilled by something unseen. A faint sound like the flutter of 100 pages turning all at once echoed through the chamber. The echo didn't come from within, it came from above. Luna turned toward the entrance. Some things shifting. Neville followed her as she stepped back through the corridor and emerged once more. Into the circular chamber of the Library of Echoes, it had changed. The once softly lit shelves were now all glowing faintly, their books trembling slightly as if stirring from a long slumber. The air was thick with quiet anticipation, not fear, but the suspense of something hidden preparing to be revealed. Luna spoke gently. The chamber below.
It triggered something. Neville moved toward a shelf near the far wall where a section of books had shifted to reveal a hollow behind them.
Nestled within was a wooden box bound with vines. It didn't look magical, more like something that had once belonged in a greenhouse or a forest. But as soon as he reached for it, the box opened itself with a gentle creak. Inside was a stack of letters, folded neatly, tied with a ribbon that shimmered like morning dew. He picked up the top one. There was no name, just a wax seal bearing the crest of Hogwarts. As he opened it, the air shifted again, and Luna, beside him, gasped softly. The letter wrote itself as they watched, to the keeper who came not seeking answers, but understanding. There is a story not yet told, a memory not yet named. Buried deep in this library, far below the shelves, beyond even the chamber of echoes, lies a truth forgotten not by time, but by choice. If you wish to uncover it, you must descend into the place where light does not reach, where books do not speak. But walls remember. Be warned, it is not darkness that will greet you, but the part of yourself you left behind when you chose to forget. Neville read the letter twice, then looked at Luna. There's more? Luna nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. It's asking us to go deeper,
not just through the library,
but through ourselves. Behind the shelf where the box had appeared, a spiral staircase began to form. Stone by stone, it built itself downward, quietly, gently, as if waiting to be noticed. Luna walked toward it. This is the library's quietest place. I think it only appears to those willing to remember. What they didn't know they forgot. Neville gave her a sidelong glance.
Is this going to be one of those deeply emotional journeys where I come face to face with some part of myself I'm not ready for?
Luna's eyes twinkled. That's usually how the best stories go. And with that, they stepped onto the spiral staircase together. The descent was slow and peaceful. The walls glowed faintly, with memories etched in moving images, silent scenes of past students, professors, even house elves, all going about their quiet moments of hope, failure, love, and learning. No battles, no grand speeches, just the soft beauty of living within Hogwarts. Each step downward felt like walking deeper into one's own thought. At the bottom of the staircase, they arrived at a stone chamber filled with shallow water, only an inch deep, perfectly still. Floating above the water were hundreds of unbound book pages, each one glowing faintly, suspended in mid-air. Neville stepped closer. The water rippled beneath his boots, but no sound echoed. Even their breathing felt hushed. He reached for a page. The moment he touched it, the page dissolved into mist and whispered, "You were never as alone as you believed." The words settled into his chest like warmth. Luna moved to another page. It read, "The love you never spoke still grew." They looked around in awe. This was the heart of the library. Not a place of facts, spells, or rules, but of emotions never spoken, memories never shared, and truths that had nowhere else to go. In this sacred silence, Luna and Neville understood the library had never been just a place of books. It was a sanctuary for feelings, for the quiet pain of moving on, for the joy that never found words, for the thoughts that had waited years to be seen. The room didn't ask anything of them. It simply let them be. And in that stillness, something inside them shifted, softly, gently, like a door opening inward. They would carry this place with them, even long after they left. Because once you hear an echo, you never forget its source. Luna and Neville lingered in the soft stillness of the heart of the library, the shallow water reflecting not their faces, but their feelings. Above them, the pages of untold thoughts continued to drift, silent, yet pulsing with meaning. Though they had already discovered so much, the air whispered that something deeper remained. Not in the books, but in the choices they now had to make. There was no guide.
No spell, no map carved into the stone.
Only intuition and the quiet tug of the castle's ancient consciousness. Neville turned slowly toward a small alcove at the far end of the chamber, one they hadn't noticed before. A narrow table sat against the wall, and on it rested two objects. A blank journal, bound in silver-threaded linen, and a small round stone, pale and smooth like river-washed moonlight. As he approached, Luna joined him,
eyes shimmering with curiosity. "They weren't here when we arrived," Neville said softly. Luna nodded.
"I think they appear for those who choose to leave something behind." Neville looked down at the objects. "Leave behind?" Luna tilted her head thoughtfully.
"Not physically, emotionally, spiritually maybe. This place? It listens, yes, but it also gives, I think. It lets you speak a truth you never could and gives it a home." He took a breath and picked up the stone.
It was warm, not magically, but comfortingly, almost like it had been held many times before. Luna opened the journal. Its pages shimmered faintly, like frost caught in candlelight.
No ink or quill was needed.
She placed her fingers on the first page, and immediately, glowing script began to appear. Only this time, not from the library, but from her own mind. It read, "I always believed the stars could hear me, that even when I was alone, I wasn't truly forgotten.
I just never told anyone because I was afraid they'd laugh." Neville stepped back and let the moment be hers.
The chamber respected silence, and in return, it rewarded presence. When she was done, Luna closed the book and placed it gently back on the table. The linen cover glowed softly, then faded to a still calm. Neville held the stone for a long time. He didn't speak aloud. He didn't need to. Whatever he gave to the library in that moment, whether a grief, a forgiveness, or simply a memory that never had a place, it accepted it quietly. Then, the stone shimmered and gently floated from his palm, drifting upward like a lantern on water. It joined the other silver thoughts in the air, not erased, but remembered. As the light from their offerings settled into the room, the quiet around them seemed to deepen.
Not empty. Complete. Luna looked at Neville with a small smile.
"We could stay here forever," he laughed softly. "We could, but the plants in Greenhouse 2 might start to miss me." They both knew, in that way friends often do without saying so, that it was time to return, but not before one final choice. As they turned to leave, a final door appeared, one that hadn't been there when they arrived. Carved into its wooden frame were the words, "Take with you only what you're ready to carry." Luna stepped forward and laid her hand on the handle. The door creaked open with the gentlest of sounds, revealing a small room bathed in warm golden light. Inside were hundreds, perhaps thousands, of envelopes, each sealed, each bearing no name, but each glowing faintly, as if still alive with breathless anticipation. Neville reached for one, but paused.
"Do you think we're meant to open them?"
Luna gently shook her head. "No, I think we're meant to leave one." Understanding blossomed between them. Neville reached into his satchel and pulled out a folded parchment. It was an old note, something he'd once written to himself, but never had the courage to read again. He placed it on the nearest shelf, and as soon as he did, the letter shimmered and sealed itself, joining the others. Luna leaned in close and whispered to the shelves, "Take care of it." Then they turned back toward the spiral staircase, the way behind them closing silently, respectfully. As they ascended, neither spoke for a while. There was no need. The echoes they carried now were not heavy, but light, not burdens, but companions. When they finally stepped back into the upper levels of the library, the shelves no longer trembled. The books no longer whispered. Everything was still, as though it had always been, waiting for their return. Neville turned to Luna with a quiet awe. "Do you think the others will ever find it?" Luna smiled gently. "Only if they're listening." And with that, they stepped once more into the familiar halls of Hogwarts, the afternoon sunlight now gently pouring through the stained glass windows. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimed. A group of students passed them by, laughing softly, unaware of the chamber far below, where their quiet thoughts might one day rest. The Library of Echoes had accepted their truth, and offered something rare in return: peace. The familiar glow of Hogwarts greeted Luna and Neville as they stepped back into the library's main corridor. Candles floated serenely overhead. The polished floors reflected amber light. From the outside, it seemed as if nothing had changed, but something had. It wasn't the world that felt different, it was them. The two friends walked in silence, each wrapped in quiet reflection. As they passed the towering shelves and quiet alcoves, Luna's gaze caught a movement, a soft shimmer, barely noticeable, coming from a narrow shelf they hadn't noticed before. She slowed, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Neville, did this shelf feel shorter last time?" He looked over. The shelf now stretched slightly higher, as if it had grown overnight. Books were arranged with new symmetry, and in the center sat a single volume, plain, light grey with no title. Luna reached for it gently, brushing her fingertips across the surface. This time, the book didn't hum, didn't whisper, didn't react. Instead, it opened on its own. A slow, respectful flutter, pages turning one by one until they settled near the end. And then, as if summoned by their presence, words began to appear. Not glowing, not ethereal, written in ink.
Real, grounded, and still somehow warm. Neville leaned closer as Luna began to read. Every library holds books of knowledge.
Some hold memories, but few hold the hearts of those who never asked to be remembered, and yet were. In the quiet corners of the world, there are truths that are not loud, but loyal. Secrets that are not shameful, but sacred. Feelings that were never spoken, but always real. The Library of Echoes does not archive history. It honors humanity. A pause, then on the very next page, they saw something unexpected. Their names. Written plainly, Luna Lovegood, Neville Longbottom, but they were not alone. Below their names appeared the names of others, names they recognized from the past. Students, professors, even a house elf or two. Neville blinked. "These are all the ones who visited the library before us?" Luna nodded slowly, her voice touched by wonder. The keepers, the listeners. And then, as if turning the final page of a very old story, the book revealed its last message. A revelation, not loud, not dramatic, but something deeper, something quiet and deeply rooted in the heart of magic itself. Magic does not only exist in spells, charms, or power. It lives in understanding, in remembrance, in compassion. Those who enter the Library of Echoes are not chosen for their might, but for their willingness to listen, to carry what others leave behind, and to let go of what they no longer need, to speak without words, to hear what was never said. This is the highest form of magic, Neville exhaled slowly, as if some long-held tension had finally dissolved in the warmth of those words. He closed the book gently and placed it back on the shelf.
I don't think I've ever felt more like myself. Luna looked at him, her soft eyes luminous.
That's the real gift of this place, not the memories,
Not the magic.
but the permission to be exactly who we are. Without needing to explain it, the room around them seemed to agree. The candles swayed gently, casting golden reflections over the stone floor like ripples on a pond. They didn't need a spell to close the hidden chambers. They didn't need a wand to seal the secrets they'd uncovered. The library had already accepted their presence. It had whispered to them, let them whisper back. And now it quietly returned to sleep. But not before one final offering as they prepared to leave. A final note appeared on the shelf where the book had rested. Luna lifted it carefully. It read, "Return when your heart is full. Return when your heart is heavy. Return when you no longer know what to say. We will be here, listening." There was no signature. There didn't need to be. The Library of Echoes had no keeper. It was the keeper. Luna and Neville walked out of the hidden chamber, through the tall corridors, and past the grand entrance to the library. Outside, the evening had begun to settle. Rain brushed gently against the windows, and the distant sound of a piano echoed from one of the common rooms. The castle, as always, was alive in the most comforting of ways. Neither of them looked back. They didn't need to, because something within them had changed. Gently, quietly, the kind of change that only comes from being heard. The soft hush of twilight had blanketed the castle by the time Luna and Neville stepped outside the library's great oak doors. The stone corridors were now dimly lit by floating sconces, casting long golden shadows along the floor. It was the hour of calm, where footsteps softened, voices faded, and the old castle of Hogwarts exhaled into peace. They walked in gentle silence. It wasn't the quiet of awkwardness, nor even contemplation. It was the quiet of having been somewhere that touched something too delicate for words. The air smelled of old parchment, lavender from the nearby greenhouse, and the faint scent of wax from the evening's candles. Hogwarts always smelled a little different in the evenings, as if the castle itself shifted moods once the daylight faded. Tonight, it felt like it was smiling. Neville tucked his hands into his robes, his shoulders a little lighter than they had been when the day began. "It's strange," he murmured. "I don't feel like we uncovered anything earth-shattering, but somehow everything feels different." Luna's voice was soft as velvet. That's the way the truest things work. Quiet changes, gentle shifts. They stopped near the edge of one of the inner courtyards, where vines crept softly along ancient stones, and the fountain in the center rippled in slow, enchanted rhythm. The night sky above shimmered through enchanted glass, and somewhere in the distance, the faint cry of a nightjar drifted in. Luna stepped up to the fountain's edge, watching the water dance as starlight reflected off its surface. "Do you think," she said, "that Hogwarts knows what we carry when we walk its halls?" Neville nodded, a slow, thoughtful motion.
I think it always has. I just don't think we always stop long enough to hear what it's saying back. They stayed there for a while, letting the hush of evening settle around them.
The magic they had touched wasn't the sort that changed the world, but the sort that mended the world quietly, thread by thread, heart by heart. It didn't cast shadows or summon storms. It simply listened, and in that listening, it helped things heal. Luna finally turned toward him. "You know, not everyone would have followed me down there. Not everyone would have heard it." Neville gave a soft laugh. "Maybe, but I think I was meant to hear it, just like you were." Above them, a light breeze passed through the trees lining the courtyard, barely more than a breath, but it carried a sense of something old and gentle, as if the library itself was saying goodbye for now, not with words, but with presence. Neville reached up and caught a falling leaf in his palm, watching as it curled gently, then rested. "We should tell Professor McGonagall what we found." Luna shook her head with a small, dreamy smile. "No, I think this one we keep between us. For now," he nodded. He understood. Some secrets weren't meant to be hidden. They were just meant to be held softly.
Like lullabies in the dark.
Like echoes in the quiet. Together they began walking again, slowly, calmly, back toward the heart of the castle, toward warm hearths, soft chairs, and the comforting rustle of blankets. The night was stretching long now, inviting rest, inviting dreams. And as they passed under the final archway, something shimmered on the stone above them. Faint, nearly invisible, yet unmistakably there, a single line etched in silver. "The ones who listen are never truly alone." Luna looked up, then smiled softly and continued on. The door closed gently behind them, and the castle exhaled once more into stillness. And now, dear listener, the candlelight has dimmed, the halls of Hogwarts have grown quiet, and our story has gently reached its end. Luna and Neville have returned to their rooms, where warm blankets and the soft ticking of enchanted clocks welcome them into sleep. The Library of Echoes rests once more beneath the castle, its doors hidden, its memories safe, the thoughts left unspoken.
Are no longer alone. Perhaps tonight, as you lie still in your own bed, you can imagine the feeling of that gentle chamber, where the pages do not judge and your softest feelings are simply heard, where the things you didn't say still find a home.
Where magic isn't loud or glowing, it's quiet, thoughtful, and kind. Take a deep breath with me now, in through your nose and out, like the gentle rustle of parchment turning in a hushed room. Let your body grow still, knowing that the castle keeps watch, that the stories you hold inside you matter, even if they've never been spoken aloud, and if, perhaps, one day you find yourself wandering the quiet halls of imagination. You might stumble upon a door that wasn't there before. You might hear your name in a whisper. You might feel the presence of stories waiting to be discovered, not in the world, but within yourself. Because magic, true magic, lives in those places. In listening, in remembering,
in kindness. So sleep now, little dreamer.
Let your heart be light. Let the echo of your quiet thoughts drift gently through the stars. The library remembers, and it will always be there. Just beyond the next page, the next dream, the next soft breath in the night. Good night from Hogwarts, and may your dreams be filled with echoes of peace.